There's something really cool being investigated right now for sleep, for depression, and for stress, which is really sort of a three-headed monster. They all kind of work together. Poor sleep, depression, and stress all create this cycle where each one feeds on each other. Now, rather than drag this video out and make you guess what this amazing compound is, I'll tell you straight up, but then I'm gonna give you all the research so you understand the dosing, you understand what it is. We're talking about Korean red ginseng. There are a few different types of ginseng, but Korean red ginseng is the one that we're focusing on because as far as the data in these categories is concerned, it really is powerful. Now, when you consume ginseng, it turns into something else in your body. So these compounds that are in ginseng actually get broken down and turn in to something called compound K, which our gut microbiome turns it into this. And we have an enzyme in our body that is responsible for this. This compound K seems to be really unique. Now, honestly, you could take my word for ginseng being good for sleep, stress, and depression, but let's go ahead and let's look at some research so you have a full understanding of what has been done in rodent model studies, human model studies, and also observational studies. Before we get into ginseng specifically, there was a study that was published in Sleep that took a look at over 1,900 people. And this is just to reinforce how important sleep is. What they found is that when subjects were even mildly sleep deprived, it had a tremendous impact on their cognitive function, their motor function, but most of all, their mood, and huge increases in fasting glucose and significant increases in their inflammatory markers. So increases in inflammation just from one night of poor sleep. But then there was another study that showed that simply decreasing your sleep from 7 hours down to 5 to 6 hours ended up decreasing the proportion of fat burned compared to muscle by 55% during weight loss, and increased fat-free mass burning by up to 60%. In other words, just being sleep deprived, but being on a calorie-restricted diet can make it so that you're burning more muscle instead of fat. That's just to really drive home how important this is. Now let's look at the ginseng stuff. So with Korean red ginseng, there was a study that was done. This one is done in rodents. We're gonna get to the human trial stuff in a second. That was really fascinating with sleep. They found that when they gave rodents Korean red ginseng, it increased their total sleep, it improved their non-REM sleep, and it decreased their sleep-wake cycles. So they weren't going through as many cycles. They were actually getting into deep stages the way that they should. Now, mechanistically, what they believe to be happening is an influence on GABA. Now, GABA is that brain activation that we want when we sleep. It's that calm, relaxed feeling. And this potential activation of GABA goes right in line with what should be happening at night. When we are asleep, we have maximal activation of GABA, which means that you're gonna have less sympathetic tone. What that means is you're gonna have less just alertness, obviously, and the brain is going to be calm and able to essentially go through its cycles better. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're dampening the nerve transmission that is happening at night. Because you're not awake, you shouldn't have robust amounts of nerve transmission. But now let's look at the human stuff, because that's more mechanistic and rodent. With humans, we look at a study that was published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. What they did is they gave subjects 1,500 milligrams of Korean red ginseng 3 times per day for 7 days. Okay, they saw that this improved their total sleep time, it improved their sleep efficacy, and it decreased their total wake time, so how much they would wake up or how long it would take them to fall asleep. And they found that it decreased their N1 sleep, which we'll talk about in a second, and it increased their REM. If you look at the graph that's on the screen right now, that kind of breaks down the study a little bit, N1 sleep is the transitionary time between being awake and being asleep. And when you shorten that, that essentially means that you're getting into a sleep stage faster, and an increase in REM means you're getting better memory consolidation and ultimately a lot of the cognitive benefits that you really want from sleep. And this is in humans, so this is really strong stuff. So we're starting to see really interesting stuff with Korean red ginseng. Now, when we get into the depression category, this is where things are really, really interesting. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Now, it's really important to note that if you're looking at ginseng, there are different kinds. We're not looking at American ginseng, we're looking at Korean red ginseng. If you want to try some Korean red ginseng, the largest producer in the world of Korean red ginseng, and literally the most reputable, the brand that actually puts literally $20 million of research per year into this stuff, is Korean Ginseng Corporation. I put a link down below, kgcus.com, but if you use code Thomas15, it'll save you 15% off. There's a bunch of different ways you can get ginseng. You can get it in pure paste form. You can get it in straight up root. There's all kinds of different ways that you can get it. They have some different compounds that you can squeeze directly in your mouth. You can mix them into tea or water that also have some immune support with them. Some really cool things. They're getting creative with it. But this is the absolute most credible form of Korean red ginseng that you can find. Each production cycle, there are 430 different quality and safety procedures that are done. 430. So this stuff is really, really legit, and they really do put the focus on it. They themselves devote about 200 researchers a year to this as well, to make sure that they're putting the best stuff out there and making sure that the proper research is done so that the world knows about this stuff. So at the end of the day, you always want to go with ginseng that you trust. You want to go with brands that are legitimate, brands that are established, and they're the largest in the world and obviously very legit for that. So they are a sponsor on this video, which is why you're also getting a discount if you check them out. So that link again, down below, KGCUS, using code Thomas15, and that'll save you 15% off whatever you want to get on their site. So a big thank you to Korean Ginseng Corporation for making this video possible and for getting this content out there. Okay, depression is obviously a serious thing. Now, it's thought to be, and really seems to be based upon the research, an effect of what is called monoamine neurotransmission. So you're looking at things like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and this happens to be some kind of like dysregulation of that. And most of the antidepressants that we're dealing with today in a pharmaceutical fashion are working upon this pathway, monoamine neurotransmission. So when dopamine, serotonin are out of whack, then obviously depression, anxiety, all these things come to be. But what we're starting to see mechanistically is that ginsenosides, the compounds that are in ginseng, might help this out by increasing what is called BDNF. Now, when we get mechanistic, we're hypothesizing here. Now, BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And what we do know is that in certain rodent models, when there is depression, and also in cadavers, when you look at people that have passed away, there are decreases in BDNF in the hippocampal region of the brain in those that suffer from depression. So we correlate, or at least strongly hypothesize, that there are decreases in BDNF when subjects are depressed. So if ginsenosides from ginseng, Korean red ginseng, can drive up BDNF, this could be one of the reasons. Now, ginseng also has an inflammomodulatory effect, so it has an impact on inflammation, and this could be one of the reasons as well. So it could be BDNF related, and it could be interleukin-6, TNF, kind of inflammation related, by potentially reducing inflammation, thereby potentially reducing depression. But we need to look at stronger human models. We need to look at stronger data. And to look at that, we look at what is called a residual depressive symptom. Now, residual symptoms come from subjects that have major depressive disorder, which really is a fancy way of saying like they had serious depression. Only about 30% of people that have major depressive disorder go into like a full remission where there are practically no residual symptoms. About 55% of people that go into remission are going into sort of a partial remission where they still have these residual symptoms. So they have feelings of pain, like literally even back pain, they have irritability, their mood, they have a hard time getting motivated, their level of interest, even sex drive, things like that can all be effective for a long period of time. So insert an interesting study from Asia Pacific Psychiatry that took a look at, once again, Korean red ginseng. And they looked at subjects that had major depressive disorder that were in remission with residual symptoms. And they gave them 3 grams of Korean red ginseng per day. They did this for 8 weeks. Now, they gave them multiple different tests. And one of the major tests that they gave them was the DRSS. This is the Depressive Residual Symptom Scale. And what they saw is that from weeks 0 to 4, there was a big improvement with this test. And those results remained for the remainder of the trial, from 4 weeks to 8 weeks. This is very, very strong. Then there was another type of survey they did, the MADRS, and this is a score, and you want this score to be lower. Their score improved, got lower, between weeks 0 to 4, and continually got better all the way to the end of the trial at week 8. So we have objective data based upon very solid questionnaires that depressive symptoms and residual symptoms were improving when Korean red ginseng was in the equation. So the data is still just coming out, right? We're seeing more and more and more. And there's a lot of research being done. Like Korean Ginseng Corporation really puts about $20 million a year into research. So really trying to find more and more of this because it's quite interesting as a potential adaptogen for stress and depression, even potentially anxiety. But let's talk about stress because this is where things get really interesting. Even if you're not depressed, you might be stressed, right? So check this out. The Journal of Pharmacological Sciences published a paper with 90 people, okay, humans, and 90 of them, so a good-sized study. What they did is they did a cold stress test with their hand. So in this case, they immerse their hand in really cold water and see how long they can last before the pain gets to them and they pull their hand out. What they did is they gave them nifedamine, which is like a vasodilator, like for blood pressure, things like that. They gave them Korean red ginseng, or they gave them a placebo. The Korean red ginseng group, if you look at the chart that's on the screen right now, they lasted the longest. They ultimately had the best pain tolerance, even better than the nifedamine. Okay, not only that, they ended up having a lower heart rate than all the other groups too. So they were able to withstand that. Now that's a big testament to the potential adaptogenic effects. And the speculated mechanism, although it seems to make the most sense anyway, is it's having an impact, the ginseng's having an impact on what is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis. So it's modulating the stress response. So it's making it so that essentially they're able to handle the pain and their threshold was higher. This could potentially be translated into exercise, translated into other means as well of just dealing with stress. And I've got an interesting study coming up on occupational stress, which is really fascinating. But in addition to this, they saw that their blood flow improved too. Now, having increases in blood flow, even better than nifedamine, is really powerful when it comes down to being able to withstand the pain and be able to deal with the cold immersion. Okay, so with that, let's look at a study that was published by the same research group, same journal, except this one looked at 23 taxi drivers in industrial stress, so occupational stress. And they gave them ginseng, Korean red ginseng, or placebo before and after their shifts. Now again, if you look at the chart, you can see that the ginseng group had less stress during their shift. Okay, and ultimately, they ended up having improvements in sympathetic tone. They were having less activation of the sympathetic nervous system, less overall norepinephrine and catecholamines that would drive up stress. Now, especially in like Asian cultures, like Japan, where really overworking is a very serious thing, where people literally die from overworking. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a very prevalent, real thing. Being able to modulate occupational stress is huge. So the actual ability to modulate the stress and cope and deal is exactly what we are looking at here. Now, as far as stress is concerned, we need to look at a very important catecholamine called norepinephrine. And it's important to know that when norepinephrine goes down, you see a slight increase in triglycerides within range, within normal range, but slight elevation. There was a study that was published in the Journal of Ginseng Research that was a 6-week study that gave subjects Korean red ginseng. And they found that during this period, their triglycerides went up within range, and that was indicative of norepinephrine decreasing. This was a double-blind study, so I like this because having double-blind styles like this really, they don't know what they're getting, they're double-blinding them, so being able to watch this for 6 weeks is pretty interesting. Now, it doesn't mean everything, but it's still something that shows us a little bit more in blood work over the longer term to say that, hey, maybe this stress modulation is a very powerful thing that could be implemented just for people that are dealing with regular everyday stress. And when you think about how it all comes back full circle, you're stressed out, maybe you don't sleep good, and then you don't sleep good, and guess what that impacts? Your mood. Guess what that also is impacting? Potentially your neurotransmission, so your serotonin, your dopamine. So then you get depressed. You see this cycle. So if we can combat the stress so that we can sleep, then maybe our mood will improve. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.